September 17, 1981. Manhattan, New York. Federal Plaza. The elevators stopped on the 26th floor. Inside a sealed grand jury room, a man raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth. Across the East River, in Brooklyn social clubs, phones began ringing. A captain had vanished. A trusted associate had disappeared without a word. For 6 years, he had eaten at their tables, borrowed money from their bosses, kissed cheeks at weddings, stood beside them at funerals. Now he was gone. The Bonanno family thought he had broken a rule. They were wrong. He had broken the entire code. His name wasn't Donnie Brasco. It was Joseph D. Pistone, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation. And by the time the Mafia understood what had happened, it was too late. Because this wasn't just an infiltration. It was a slow execution of trust. And the man who paid for it wasn't the agent. It was the captain who believed in him. Before he became Donnie Brasco, Joseph Dominic Pistone was a working-class kid from Paterson, New Jersey. The son of Italian immigrants. Quiet. Observant. Patient. Those qualities made him valuable. He joined the Federal Bureau of Investigation in 1969, at a time when the Bureau still publicly minimized the existence of a national mafia structure. J. Edgar Hoover had long resisted acknowledging a centralized criminal hierarchy. But by the early 1970s, the political climate had shifted. Congressional hearings, wiretaps, and defectors were exposing something undeniable: La Cosa Nostra was not myth. It was infrastructure. In New York, the 5 families operated like shadow governments. The Bonanno family, once one of the most powerful, had been weakened by internal civil war. The Banana War of the 1960s fractured loyalties. Boss Joseph Bonanno disappeared and returned. Factions formed. Capos switched allegiances. Trust eroded. By 1976, the Bonannos were considered unstable, ambitious but vulnerable. That vulnerability attracted the FBI. Pistone was not the first undercover agent to approach organized crime. But he would become the most patient. Instead of targeting bosses, the Bureau aimed lower. Street level. Social clubs. The spaces where ambition lived before it reached the top. His assignment was simple in theory: penetrate a mafia family deeply enough to understand its command structure. But mafia infiltration had one fatal risk. If exposed, there would be no arrest. No trial. No negotiation. Just disappearance. Meanwhile, inside the Bonanno ranks, another man was fighting his own war. Dominic "Sonny Black" Napolitano. A Brooklyn captain with ambition and limited territory. He needed earners. Loyal soldiers. Men who could generate money and expand influence. The commission was watching the Bonannos closely after years of instability. Every capo was competing for relevance. Sonny Black did not know it yet. But the FBI was about to give him exactly what he wanted. A quiet jeweler named Donnie Brasco. In September 1976, Donnie Brasco walked into a small jewelry store in Manhattan. He didn't push. He didn't impress. He lingered. That was the method. The identity was carefully constructed. A small-time jewel thief. A man with connections in Florida. Divorced. Estranged from his family. No visible ties. No paper trail that led anywhere real. For months, Pistone did nothing extraordinary. He built routine. Coffee shops. Card games. Bars in Brooklyn and Queens. He listened more than he spoke. He loaned small amounts of money and paid them back on time. In the Mafia, reliability is currency. His first meaningful connection came through Anthony Mira, a volatile Bonanno associate with ambition beyond his rank. Mira introduced him to Dominic "Sonny Black" Napolitano. That introduction changed everything. Sonny Black was a captain operating out of the Motion Lounge in Brooklyn. He was respected but not untouchable. He needed earners. He needed loyalty. And he needed to prove his faction still mattered inside a family recovering from internal war. Donnie delivered. He fenced stolen jewelry. He traveled when asked. He handled disputes without hesitation. He never rushed. That patience earned him access. Within a year, Brasco wasn't just a face in the room. He was inside conversations about territory, bookmaking operations, and potential hits. Pistone recorded names, structures, rivalries. The hierarchy unfolded in real time. Boss, underboss, consigliere, capos, soldiers, associates. The 5 families were not gangs. They were bureaucracies. Each level protected the one above it. And Sonny Black believed he was grooming Donnie for something bigger, possibly even sponsorship for formal membership. That possibility carried enormous political weight. A made man could not be touched without permission from the commission. Elevating Donnie would strengthen Sonny's influence inside the Bonanno power structure. But infiltration changes people. Pistone spent holidays with them. Attended family gatherings. Shared meals with men who would kill on command. Over time, the line between performance and reality blurred. He was trusted with secrets that could trigger life sentences. And in the Mafia, trust is not given casually. It is tested. Soon, the tests would become lethal. By 1979, Donnie Brasco had been inside for nearly 3 years. That alone was unprecedented. Undercover operations rarely survived months. This one was approaching permanence. Sonny Black began bringing him deeper into revenue streams, labor racketeering, loan sharking, and high-level sit-downs with other families. Discussions were no longer about street disputes. They were about territory lines in Manhattan. About who controlled the garment district. About who answered to whom. Then came Milwaukee. The Bonanno family wanted to expand gambling operations into the Midwest. Sonny Black saw opportunity. If he could oversee the expansion, it would elevate him within the family hierarchy. And Donnie would go with him. The plan was bold. Too bold. Expansion required approval. Approval required stability. But the Bonanno leadership was fractured. Acting bosses rotated. Informants were rumored. The commission was watching closely after years of instability within the family. Whispers began. Who was this jeweler with no clear past? Why did he ask careful questions but reveal so little? Why did federal surveillance seem to follow certain meetings? Pistone felt the shift. The warmth cooled. Glances lingered longer. Silences grew heavier. At the same time, the psychological strain intensified. Pistone missed birthdays. Anniversaries. His children were growing up with a father who existed under a false name. The Bureau demanded more intelligence. The Mafia demanded more loyalty. Both sides required total commitment. And then the most dangerous moment arrived. Sonny Black began quietly suggesting that Donnie might soon be proposed for membership. If that happened, Pistone would have to participate in a ceremony involving blood, oaths, and lifelong allegiance to La Cosa Nostra. The FBI could not allow that. But extracting him too early would waste years of penetration. The operation had reached a threshold. And thresholds inside the Mafia are unforgiving. By 1980, the operation was no longer just about one crime family. It was about federal power. The Department of Justice was preparing to weaponize the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO. Passed in 1970, it had been used cautiously. But prosecutors were now beginning to understand its potential. RICO allowed them to target entire criminal enterprises, not just individual crimes. To do that, they needed structure. They needed proof that the Mafia operated as an organized hierarchy. Joseph Pistone was delivering exactly that. Through covert recordings and daily intelligence reports, the FBI mapped the Bonanno family's chain of command. Who answered to the boss? Who controlled Brooklyn gambling? Who enforced discipline? The language of permission. The rules about killing. The protocols for disputes. This was evidence that La Cosa Nostra was not folklore. It was governance. At the same time, New York City was in crisis. The late 1970s fiscal collapse had hollowed out neighborhoods. Labor unions were infiltrated. Construction contracts were manipulated. The Mafia thrived in economic instability. Political figures quietly relied on mob-controlled unions to maintain order on job sites. Organized crime wasn't separate from power. It intersected with it. Pistone's infiltration exposed that intersection. The Bureau began preparing indictments quietly. Surveillance expanded. Wiretaps were synchronized with Pistone's movements. Informants were cross-referenced. The goal was no longer intelligence gathering. It was prosecution. But there was a problem. If Donnie Brasco were officially made, any sudden arrest wave would expose him instantly. A made man disappearing at the same time federal indictments dropped would confirm betrayal. The commission had executed men for less. The FBI had to choose between maximizing the case or saving their agent. Inside the Bonanno family, pressure intensified. Leadership was unstable. Acting bosses rotated amid suspicion. The family needed stability to maintain standing among the 5 families. Sonny Black believed elevating Donnie would strengthen his crew's influence. The Bureau knew it would sign his death warrant. The clock was narrowing. And once the Mafia sensed betrayal, there would be no negotiation. By mid-1981, the atmosphere had changed. Not dramatically. Subtly. Meetings shifted locations without explanation. Conversations stopped when Donnie entered rooms. Questions that once sounded casual now carried weight. Anthony Mira, the volatile associate who first introduced Donnie to Sonny Black, had been murdered months earlier. Officially, it was internal discipline. Unofficially, suspicion had surrounded him. The Bonanno family was cleaning its own house. Paranoia spreads quietly in organized crime. And paranoia isolates. Pistone noticed he was being tested differently. Not with violence. With silence. Invitations became conditional. Access narrowed. Sonny Black still defended him publicly, but privately, even he began asking careful questions about Donnie's Florida connections. The FBI felt it too. Wiretaps suggested growing instability within the Bonanno leadership. The commission was pressuring the family to resolve its internal weaknesses. An exposure now would not just embarrass them. It would demand retaliation. Extraction plans accelerated. But extraction itself was dangerous. If Donnie vanished abruptly, suspicion would fall directly on Sonny Black. A captain is responsible for the men he sponsors. If one turns informant, it reflects failure or complicity. Pistone understood the cost. The Bureau prepared indictments quietly, coordinating timing across multiple jurisdictions. They would pull him out and move simultaneously. Inside the motion lounge, Sonny Black continued speaking about the future. About territory. About earnings. About loyalty. He believed Donnie was his investment. And investments inside the Mafia are protected at all costs. Unless they become liabilities. On July 26, 1981, the FBI ended it. Joseph Pistone was quietly removed from the field. No dramatic escape. No confrontation. He simply stopped showing up. Inside Brooklyn, confusion turned to alarm. Calls were made to Florida. To Milwaukee. To old contacts. No one could find Donnie Brasco. Then the indictments began surfacing. Sealed cases. Coordinated arrests. Federal pressure building with surgical precision. The realization came slowly. Then all at once. Donnie Brasco had never existed. The Bonanno family convened emergency discussions. Exposure at that level was humiliation. Worse, it signaled weakness to the other 4 families. The commission demanded accountability. Responsibility flowed downward. To the captain who had vouched for him. Dominic "Sonny Black" Napolitano. He was summoned to a meeting on August 17, 1981. Before leaving his home, he removed his jewelry, his watch, his wallet. He handed them to a relative. He understood. A captain sponsors his men. He guarantees their legitimacy. By bringing an undercover agent into the family's inner structure, Sonny Black had violated the most sacred rule of La Cosa Nostra: protect the family from infiltration. He walked out that morning. He was never seen again. No body was recovered. No funeral was held. Inside the Mafia, silence is confirmation. The agent survived. The captain did not. The indictments rippled through New York. More than 100 convictions eventually stemmed from intelligence gathered during the operation. Bookmakers, enforcers, capos. The Bonanno family, already unstable, fractured further under federal pressure. But the deeper consequence was psychological. Trust collapsed. Associates were scrutinized. Backgrounds were re-examined. Sponsorship became riskier. Captains hesitated before elevating new earners. Social clubs grew quieter. Conversation shortened. Paranoia hardened into policy. The Bonanno family temporarily lost its seat on the commission, a symbolic demotion that carried real political weight inside organized crime. Other families viewed them as compromised, weak, penetrated. And beyond New York, law enforcement took notice. Undercover operations expanded nationwide. The Pistone infiltration proved something critical: the Mafia could be entered. Its mythology of impenetrability was false. Joseph Pistone entered witness protection with his family. New identities, relocations, permanent vigilance. But the operation left scars. Sonny Black's crew dissolved. Power redistributed. Younger members learned a brutal lesson: loyalty was no longer enough. Even proximity could kill you. Inside La Cosa Nostra, a new rule emerged, unspoken but understood: trust less. Test more. Assume betrayal. The damage was not just legal. It was structural. September 17, 1981. The grand jury room was quiet. Joseph Pistone finished his testimony. The record closed. The case moved forward. Across the river, a captain lay in an unmarked grave. The Mafia was built on a single currency: trust. Not money. Not violence. Trust. A man's word bound by blood. Pistone did not defeat the Bonanno family with force. He defeated it with patience. By proving that loyalty could be simulated, that belonging could be manufactured, that the code of silence could be studied and reversed. Organized crime survives on hierarchy and belief. But belief is fragile. Once doubt enters the structure, it spreads faster than bullets. Sonny Black trusted the wrong man. And in the Mafia, that is not a mistake. It is a death sentence. Silence was their protection. It became their undoing.